Recently, it was reported that a 50-year deal between the United States and Saudi Arabia to price oil only in US dollars had not been renewed, leading to speculation that the age of the petrodollar is over.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Yeah.
Now, it appears this was fake news, but that doesn't mean nothing happened. While everyone was focused on the petrodollar FUD, BRICS countries launched a new payment system that Saudi Arabia joined. That's why today we're going to tell you about the actual news that could threaten the US dollar's dominance, the launch of a new payment system that BRICS countries have been working on for years. A payment system which, believe it or not, is based on Ethereum. This is a video you cannot miss. Okay, let's start with a quick recap. BRICS is an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. The original acronym was BRIC, and it was coined by former Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in 2001. Jim predicted that Brazil, Russia, India, and China would see the most economic growth by 2050. This was partially because all four countries had growing populations, low labour costs, and lots of commodities. It was also partially because of geopolitics and commodity prices. China had just joined the World Trade Organization, the Global South was aligning with the US, and commodities were booming. If you watched our previous video about the BRICS, you'll know this started to change after the global financial crisis. Under the leadership of Xi Jinping, China started going its own way. At the same time, commodity prices collapsed. Not surprisingly, Wall Street was suddenly not so bullish on the BRICS. As we stressed in that video, however, the other reasons why Goldman Sachs had initially been bullish on the BRICS haven't changed. The BRICS countries still have growing populations, they still have low labour costs, and they still have lots of commodities. All that's missing is the commodity bull market. As most of you may have noticed, commodity prices around the world have been rising over the last few years. This has increased the geopolitical power of the BRICS. Not surprisingly, the average person has started realising this, but most Western elites continue to pretend that the BRICS aren't rising again. The result is that it's been very difficult to find quality information about what's been going on with the BRICS countries, particularly if you live in the West. It doesn't help that the BRICS countries are infamous for their government propaganda. This makes finding quality info about hot topics twice as hard. And when it comes to the BRICS, no topic has been hotter than the possibility that the bloc will launch its own shared currency to rival the US dollar. There have been countless reports claiming that this so-called BRICS currency would be gold-backed or crypto-based, but no concrete evidence that it's actually coming. If you look at the sources for these headlines, you'll notice they're often off-the-cuff comments made by government officials from BRICS countries, or proposed ideas which never even reach the pilot stage. In other words, the creation of a bona fide BRICS currency doesn't seem to be on the table for now. The creation of an alternative payment system, however, certainly is. To clarify, a BRICS currency and a BRICS payment system are two completely different things. A BRICS currency would be a literal currency, like the US dollar or the euro, for example, whereas a BRICS payment system is, well, a literal payment system, the payment rails for any currency. Consider that Russian firms have reportedly been conducting trade with Chinese firms using Tether's USDT stablecoin, which is of course pegged to the US dollar. This is extremely significant because it reveals the elephant in the room. It's not the US dollar that's the problem for the BRICS, it's the payment rails that it runs on. Now, the name of this elephant is SWIFT, the world's largest payment system. Obviously, SWIFT is aligned with Western interests, and it's been increasingly used as a financial weapon by blocking payments to certain parties. Put simply, the SWIFT payment system is a much bigger problem for the BRICS than the US dollar. That's why the BRICS have been working on an alternative to SWIFT. This payment system launched in the same week that media outlets were freaking out about the supposed US-Saudi oil deal coming to an end. Just days before that deal was supposedly set to expire, Saudi Arabia joined the BRICS payment system. It really makes you wonder if someone hyped up the US-Saudi oil thing so that nobody would notice that the BRICS had launched a competitor to SWIFT. Now, this was exponentially more significant than any oil deal or BRICS currency. If the BRICS payment system gets adopted, it really has the potential to dethrone the US dollar. And by the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to thump that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell so you don't miss the next one.
Okay, welcome to the Bro Crypto Podcast. I'm Chadimus Maximus, go by MaxChad100 on Twitter.
And I am Gigadick, the dude with the biggest P&L in all of crypto.
Bro, say what? My P&L is 100% bigger than yours.
Bro, please. I was longing Doge and drinking neat Belvedere while you were still spot buying BTC on Mount Gox, bro.
Bro, you still driving a 2020 Aventador. Where's your Bugatti at?
Bro, when bonk hits $1, I'm gonna be rocking a super yacht while you're still stuck in traffic, bro. The Bro Crypto Podcast is sponsored by the Coin Bureau Deals page. If you're looking for trading fee discounts of up to 70% and sign-up bonuses of up to $100,000 and amazing discounts on hardware wallets, then don't be a bro, be in the know, and check out the link in the description below. And now, back to the show.
Bro.
Now, the name of the payment system the BRICS recently released is mBridge. If you watched our first video about mBridge back in February, you'll know that it's a CBDC system that was built by the central banks of Thailand, Hong Kong, China, and the United Arab Emirates, with the help of the BIS. Now, for context, CBDC stands for Central Bank Digital Currencies, which are, well, digital currencies that are issued and controlled by central banks. The BIS, or Bank for International Settlements, is the so-called bank for central banks, and it's been helping central banks around the world roll out their CBDC systems. If you know anything about CBDCs, you'll know they are seriously dystopian, since they make it possible for central banks and governments to control how you spend and even how much you can save. The catch is that there are technically multiple types of CBDCs, each with its own features and purpose. Broadly speaking, there are two types of CBDCs: retail CBDCs, which will be used by plebs like you and me, and wholesale CBDCs, which will be used by select individuals and institutions. As you might have guessed, mBridge is a wholesale CBDC system, and it's meant to be used only by institutions. And as I mentioned in the intro, mBridge is based on Ethereum. In fact, it's essentially an Ethereum copy. It uses a blockchain called the MBL, which is coded in Solidity and uses the EVM for smart contracts. Of course, the difference between Ethereum and the MBL is that the MBL is private and permissioned. This means you need to be a central bank or commercial bank to use the MBL. Naturally, these central banks and commercial banks run the nodes on the MBL, with participating central banks running de facto validator nodes and participating commercial banks running de facto relay nodes. Another difference between mBridge and Ethereum is that mBridge seems to be much faster. This is because of its novel consensus mechanism called dashing. Now, dashing was developed by Chinese researchers, and it validates a block by checking random chunks of it rather than the whole thing. If this sounds familiar, that's because dashing is analogous to Celestia's data availability sampling. More about that in the description. I digress. Now, in case it wasn't clear enough, the primary purpose of mBridge is to make it possible for its users to bypass the existing US-centric financial system. This not only includes bypassing SWIFT, but also bypassing all intermediary banks in cross-border transactions, as well as the US dollar in forex trading. For reference, the US dollar is basically a bridge currency, especially for large transactions. So, if you want to swap, say, a large amount of New Zealand dollars for Canadian dollars, you'll have to swap New Zealand dollars for US dollars and then US dollars for Canadian dollars. That's just because it's not always possible to trade lots of New Zealand dollars directly for Canadian dollars. With mBridge, you'd be able to swap New Zealand dollars for Canadian dollars directly from a bank in New Zealand to a bank in Canada, assuming these banks are a part of the mBridge system. This removes the US dollar as the bridge currency, removes intermediary banks from the transfer, and removes SWIFT from the equation. This is extremely significant. Besides the fact that it facilitates international trade, the fact that it removes the US dollar as the bridge currency means that the tens of trillions of dollars of demand coming from large forex transfers disappears. In plain English, the demand for USD falls by trillions of dollars. This weakens the US dollar as the dollar's strength is fundamentally a product of supply and demand, just like every other asset. If the demand for US dollars goes down because fewer countries are using it as a bridge currency for forex transactions, its value will go down, assuming the same or more supply. And here is where things get crazy. If you watched our recent video about the BIS's CBDC survey, you'll know that central banks seem to be turning their focus away from retail CBDCs and turning more towards wholesale CBDCs. What are the chances that this is because they want to become a part of mBridge? And this ties in to Saudi Arabia's recent decision to join mBridge. The BIS revealed this on the same day it launched the new payment system. The BIS also revealed that the number of observing members, i.e. the number of central banks and commercial banks considering joining mBridge, has risen to 26. This too is extremely significant, and not just because it means mBridge is being adopted. For those unaware, last year the BRICS invited 6 countries to join its growing alliance, which is now being referred to as BRICS+. These countries were Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Argentina. As some of you may have heard, every one of these countries accepted, except for Argentina, which was to be expected given that its new Presidente, Javier Milei, appears to be not so subtly aligned with the global north. Whatever the case, what's fascinating is that Saudi Arabia has been sending mixed signals about joining the BRICS. As with headlines related to stuff like the BRICS currency, there have been some stories suggesting that Saudi Arabia had joined the BRICS and others claiming it had not, with both citing official sources. As the saying goes though, actions speak louder than words, and Saudi Arabia joining mBridge is a very loud action. As many geopolitical experts have pointed out, Saudi Arabia's lack of clarity around joining the BRICS is likely because it doesn't want to increase friction with its Western counterparts. This is something we pointed out in our previous video about the BRICS. India has been keeping things low-key on the BRICS front as well. And this makes perfect sense when you realize that the BRICS technically isn't an established organization. For the time being, the BRICS, or rather the BRICS+, is effectively a club consisting of countries from the global south. It doesn't have a headquarters, an official website, or even a charter with its stated aims. As we also mentioned in our previous BRICS video, this is presumably because the BRICS countries need to establish a financial system before establishing an organization. To put things into perspective, the UN, which is controlled by the West, was only established after the Bretton Woods system had been set up. A big part of why the Bretton Woods system became so powerful was because of institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, which practically trapped foreign countries with dollar-denominated debts that had lots of strings attached. If history is any indication, this means the BRICS need to take a similar path. As it so happens, the BRICS established a financial organization analogous to the IMF and World Bank called the New Development Bank, or NDB, back in 2015. The NDB seems to be the only BRICS initiative with an actual entity, and it has $100 billion earmarked for infrastructure development and loans. In theory, this gives the NDB the power to do what the IMF and World Bank are famous for: Go to a country that desperately needs financial support and give it to them on the condition that they do things that are favourable to the BRICS. In practice, there's one big problem: the existing payment system. If the NDB were to engage in IMF-level predatory lending, the US and its allies would get word of it and probably make life harder for the NDB and its borrowers. Similarly, if the NDB were to give loans to countries that aren't close allies of the United States, it could likewise find itself experiencing payment frictions. With mBridge, however, all of these problems disappear. Now, although we couldn't find any concrete evidence that the NDB is going to use mBridge, the circumstantial evidence is certainly there. For starters, the NDB is based in China. Recall that Hong Kong and China are 2 of the 5 participants in mBridge. The UAE also happens to be one of the shareholders in the NDB, and you'll recall that it too is a participant in mBridge. That makes 3 out of 5. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has reportedly been trying to join the NDB since last year, and it recently joined mBridge. That's 4 out of 5. This leaves Thailand, which recently applied to join the BRICS, reportedly due to dissatisfaction with how it's being treated by the West. Now, we aren't sure how mBridge's governance process works, but we know that it has one, and we're certain that all participants will vote to plug in the NDB if it comes up. So, this brings me to the big question, and that is what's next for the BRICS and their mBridge payment system? Well, the answer is complicated. I'll start by saying that mBridge is still in its early stages. The recent launch was a minimum viable product, or MVP, which, as the name suggests, is its initial public release. That said, though, it's clear that BRICS exists primarily as an economic initiative. It's also clear that the reason why so many countries are joining it is because they want the economic benefits that come with being affiliated with large commodity producers. This underscores the extreme significance of mBridge. You see, the biggest reason why the US dollar has so much value is because it's required for international trade, specifically to buy commodities like oil, which are priced in dollars. This begs the trillion-dollar question. As a country, what do you need more, the commodities or the dollars required to buy them? Well, logically, the answer depends on the country. If a country has lots of commodities, then it probably doesn't need US dollars that much. Conversely, if a country doesn't have lots of commodities, then it probably needs the US dollar a lot. The consequence is very predictable geopolitical alignments. Countries that have lots of their own commodities have the power to defy the US and its allies, whereas those that don't must align with the US and its allies or else be starved of dollars. But again, it's not the US dollar per se, it's the rails on which it runs. Remember, you can always pay in cash if needs be. What mBridge ultimately does is allow countries without commodities to purchase these commodities directly from producers without having to rely on US-controlled infrastructure. Put differently, it gives them freedom from US influence and allows them to make more independent decisions. As you can imagine, this is a very attractive value proposition, given that just like most people, most countries just want to be left alone. They don't want to be pawns in the proxy wars between the US and China. They just want to live in peace, and mBridge gives them the tools they need to stay neutral. The catch is that this will be easier said than done. And this is where things get truly interesting, and I'll use a real-world example to explain. The unprecedented financial sanctions levied against Russia have made it very difficult for the country to use US dollars for trade, leaving it with the currencies from its counterparties. Last year, one of Russia's officials revealed that it had amassed billions of Indian rupees that it couldn't use as a result of selling oil in rupees to India. Now, under normal circumstances, Russia would have traded those rupees for US dollars so that it could use them to buy stuff from other countries, but it can't. In practice, this means that Russia can only use these rupees to buy from India. The problem is that Russia already has most of what India is selling. FYI, India's primary export is petroleum products, which Russia also has lots of. There's only so many textiles and so much rice and whatever else that Russia needs to buy. You can think of it as like being given a credit card with an unlimited balance that can only be used in a single shop that mostly sells stuff you already have and don't need more of. This is a problem that mBridge participants will run into as more currencies start being added to the payment system. This will inevitably result in the need for a bridge currency that's analogous to the US dollar, and this is where the mixed messages about the BRICS currency start to make sense. Everyone has been assuming that the BRICS currency will be used by regular people, that it will be a standard retail fiat currency. However, it's likely that the BRICS currency will be wholesale, contained to the mBridge system and used exclusively by the central banks and commercial banks that are a part of that system. Notably, its only purpose could be to ensure that nobody is left holding, say, billions of rupees that they don't need. The idea that the BRICS currency will be backed by a basket of commodities starts to make a lot more sense when you look at it through the lens of being a bridge currency on mBridge. More importantly, its creation will be a prerequisite for smaller countries with smaller currencies to join the mBridge system. After all, lots of countries desperately need the petroleum products India is selling and would therefore be happy to hold billions of rupees via mBridge. The same can't be said for countries like Costa Rica, however, whose largest exports are photography products. Countries won't want to hodl billions of Costa Rican colons. In sum then, the launch of mBridge could very well mark the beginning of the end of the US dollar's dominance, but it's going to take time, and there will be lots of setbacks along the way. The US will also not go quietly and will do everything in its power to ensure it maintains control of the financial system. Contrary to popular opinion, the US will not do this through war because it has a weapon more powerful than any nuclear bomb: the US dollar and the trillions of dollar-denominated debts that countries owe. Making the dollar stronger is enough to bring many countries to their knees, as we saw in late 2022. And say, did you see that the DXY is rising? Probably nothing. Okay, that's all for today's video. So if you learned something new, be sure to grind that like button to let us know. If you want to keep learning, subscribe to the channel and ping that notification bell. And if you want to help others learn about what the BRICS currency is really about, then share this video with them. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Guy, over and out.